This is actually a good place to start looking at gameplay abilities and how we can use the OtherWorld system to leverage the power of transitioning back and forth between worlds to create gameplay ability systems for changing the world state. For instance, setting the world on fire, or freezing hell over, or jumping in and out of the spirit world. So far, we've talked about portals as physical things, like this portal here. You have to walk through it in order to be able to trigger a world transition. And we've talked about implementing an interface for the entities for custom behavior. To be able to transition manually, we can also implement an interface, but for a portal instead. But instead of having it as a physical object that you have to walk through, I'm just going to go ahead and implement it on the third person character. And by doing so, we enable button presses on the keyboard or the controller and directly interacting with the OtherWorld system to request a world transition. Again, we're going to implement an interface, and in this case it's called Portal. And the Portal interface here provides us with a few functions. The first two here are, just like the name implies, events that fire off when the transition has been completed and the transition has been initiated. For our intents and purposes right now, these don't really matter because we don't want to play a particle effect or make a sound or something. We just want to transition. The other three, however, are important. We'll start off with the can activate portal. This function is actually asked by the other system and requested to say, hey, can we actually traverse? Is this player actually being able to do this, or the entity, or what have you? Does this portal actually enable world transition? You can imagine this being on a cooldown, for instance, and you can't really traverse back and forth between the different worlds unless the cooldown has been ticking down to 0, or you need to have sufficient amount of mana to be able to transition into the other world. For instance, setting the world on fire requires 30% of your mana pool, whereas freezing it over might just need 25 or 15. For our intents and purposes right now, though, I'm just going to set this one to always return true, because this ability will just be a toggle. Speaking of toggles, we need to be able to determine what world we want to jump into. And that's what the determine target world does. So we need to be able to transition from one world to another, and depending on what world we are currently at, we want to know the next one. So for that, I'm just going to do an equal here and check if the world is world A. We're just going to traverse into world B. And if not, we're just going to go, and that means that we're in world B, and we're going to traverse into world A. So once again, if the current world is world A, then we want to transition into world B. However, if it's not world A, meaning it's world B, we want to traverse back to world A. You can imagine this part here being some kind of an ability system checkup, so you already have the world on fire, so you can't really transition into world on fire again. Or if you toggle between various ones, this is where it's done, right? And then we can also have the actors to transition function. And the actors that the reason why we have this function is some portals only have a subset of entities that can traverse. For instance, in a foreshadowing scenario where you have a portal in a finite space, you just want to show off some mechanics, some actors, some entities. This is where that would be implemented. In our case, this is a perfect place for us to get an introduction to the various systems that OtherWorld ships with. And in this case, we want to know all OtherWorld actors that exist, because this is a global thing, right? And for that, we have the world registry. Registry. There is one called OtherWorld Registry, and it keeps track of the components and actors that you have in your scene that need to be activated and deactivated. And we can ask this registry, give me all the world components. And that's all we need to do for this one to make it global. And that's all we need to do to have this very simple mechanic in place. So now that we've implemented these functions, we need to trigger the actual transition. And for that, we have another system in OtherWorld called the Transition Manager. And this Transition Manager has a function called request portal transition. So all we need to do is actually call this one. To be able to send things over here in the portal, which will be a reference to self, you need to have compiled it before, so that the Unreal actually knows that this is an interface implementing the portal, and it's actually going to be the same thing here. So the triggering actor and the portal itself will be the same, right? And we now just need to have a button to be able to trigger it. In my case, I'm just going to call debug num0, which would suit our purposes here. In your case, you probably want to do it more, use the input system using events. The input actions, sorry. But for now, this will serve our purposes. So compiling it, saving it, just go over everything again. We have something that would trigger the transition. We have the World Transition Manager, which handles actual transitions. We have a number of functions here. We have the can activate portal. In our case, I'm just going to go ahead and say that this is always activatable. We need to determine what world we want to transition into. In your case, this could be a skill tree, this could be a button press, etc. That will determine where you want to transition. We have the actors to transition into the new world. And in this case, I'm asking the world registry, hey, give me all the actors that we have in the world, so that we can transition them. These two functions, the complete and begin, are not necessary. Those are just used for visual effects or audio triggering or what have you. Anything that happens reacting to those kinds of interactions. So playing right now, we should be able to just press 0 to transition into the next world. Would you look at that? So I trigger it, everything's phased through. I trigger it again, now this is solid. I have the box here, and the portals work just as before. So let's go ahead and jump. Hey, I'm gonna just play around a little bit with this. And I'm gonna make this world A. And it's probably not gonna work. There we go. And the reason for this one being out of sync from the beginning was because we, by default, deactivate everything. So now we have a puzzle, right? So we have some kind of a stair-like puzzle. We jump here, and we jump. If we don't change the ability, we just fall through. So I'm just going to use it, and use it again. And ta-da!